Starting. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, we're back. We're talking variable scope scan. Let's go.
Best Variable Scopes 2019 edition.
Hey, what is happening, everybody? It has been a long time since we last saw each other. So how you been? You look good. You've been working out? You look great. So where do we last leave off? Let me think. Up. So those were our selections from 2016. What are the best optics available right now as of this video, which is December 2019? To move forward, we need to establish some ground rules. So the first ground rule is it has to have a daylight bright reticle. That kind of rules out a lot of optics, like the Vortex Strike Eagle, primary arms 1-6, the Burst RT6, all really good optics, especially at the lower end on the price range, but that's not included on our list. So that's one of our ground rules. So for number 2, let's establish a practical budget range. It's between 500 on the low end and on going all the way up to 2,000. With those ground rules in effect, let's take a look at what we've decided are the best optics for December 2019. So let's put them to work.
Steiner P4Xi.
$200. Hit. $300. Hit. $400. Hit.
Okay, the Steiner P4Xi 1-4 scope. A lot of people have these now. It came out, I think, in 2017, 2018, and for good reason. It's got a daylight bright reticle, almost as bright as the Vortex Razor. You'll definitely have no problem finding it. That brightness is controlled by this brightness knob on the left hand side. It's got off switches in between. Like the rest of the scope, it is a little mushy, so if I were you, I would put it on off and then check it. In my opinion, when you're shooting fast, a crossword reticle, the simpler the reticle, the better. It's got just enough hash marks to be useful for shooting out a medium to long range. When you're actually looking through the optic, it's got very clear glass for its price range. The eye box, so both 1 and 4, are very comfortable, so you're moving your head around. You can very easily see down the reticle without too much shadow. Back here, you have the zoom lever. It actually spins very smoothly. So going from 1-4, and also, the throw is not that far. When you're actually shooting with this thing and you need to go from, short range to medium range in a go, it's like, you're there. As far as handling, you're talking about 17 ounces, so which is about medium weight. It's only a little bit heavier than the lightest scope I've used with the Leupold VX6. So now that we kind of talked about some of the things that are actually the highlights of the scope, some of the things that are limitations is, number 1 is actually, I mentioned earlier, it's only 4X. 1-4X actually can still take you far, out to like 400 yards or so, but I personally wouldn't shoot that much further than that. It's actually hard to see. I mentioned the brightness knob is a little bit mushy, but not only that, but even though it's got nice capped turrets, once you actually zero the scope with these turrets and you dial in your elevation and windage, I would not, dial in elevation with these. They're really mushy. So set it, forget it, for your zero, and you're good to go. Just put the cats back on and just use your hash marks when you're shooting out at medium long range. Who's a scope for? If you're moving from red dot into low power variables and you want to add a scope that doesn't add too much weight to the gun, but you want a bright reticle and you don't want to compromise on glass quality, you got the Steiner reputation for building quality optics, the P4Xi is definitely the optic for you, and that's what I would recommend.
Vortex PST Gen 2.
200. Hit. 300. 400.
Okay, so the Vortex PST Gen 2 1 to 6. Let me tell you, this optic is quite the powerhouse given what you're paying for it and the features that it brings to bear. It's like Vortex took all the features of the Vortex Razor and said, hey, let's put them in the PST model and price it very aggressively. Since we're comparing it to the Razor, is the field of view as wide as the Razor? Well, you can see here, it's just a little bit, less. So you can look at it, the specs, you can see it through some of the sample footage. Just know that it's not as flat as the Vortex Razor, but it's still a very, very good sight picture. It's got two reticles, the VMR2, and it's got MIL or MOA choice, the illumination control on the left side of the optic. Very similar to the Vortex Razor. It does have, an off switch in between, but just remember that it does not have a lock feature like the Vortex Razor. Since we're talking about controls, let's talk about the precision capped turrets. You can dial in your elevation if you want to when you're shooting long range. Personally, I like using the hash mark. As we mentioned on the Vortex Razor, remember the Gen 1? It took forever to turn from 1 to 11. It was like, the throw is pretty long from 1 to 6. It's not one of those optics where you go, oh, okay, I'm just gonna be able to switch it very quickly. You really can't do that with the PST. Don't do it without a scope lever. Unfortunately, you have to buy one, but I would recommend you get one. Now, one of the other limitations of the optic is, it's a little heavy. It's not as heavy as the Vortex Razor 1 at 25. This one comes in, I think, at 22.7 or so. Check the stats. In summary, who's this optic for? With its bright reticle, it's got a very clear sight picture. The field of view is almost as good as Razor, still wide, almost as good as a Razor. So it's got near 1x performance. It's got, you spin it all the way to 6. It's got a great reticle for long range shooting. This is probably the best 1 to 6 optic under $1,000 in my opinion. Vortex, you guys really hit it out of the park with this one. I'm seeing these everywhere and for good reason. It's a great scope.
Vortex Razor Gen 2E.
$200. 300. 400.
What can I say about this optic? Did you love the original Gen 2? Well, this one is exactly like the Gen 2, except they cut out about 1/4 pound of weight. And the obvious question is, man, can you tell? Yes, you can tell. When you're running around this thing, you can definitely tell. This thing actually weighs less than the PST Gen 2 that we just talked about earlier. Outside of just, stripping that weight, there is one other nice thing they did, is do you guys remember we talked about that scope lever on the Vortex Gen 2? It was like, impossible to turn. It's actually much, much nicer now. I wouldn't say it's the fastest zooming scope, but it is nice. So it is very easy to turn, although it's got, a wide arc for 1 to 6, and you'd still need to buy the scope lever. So when you mount the scope at 1x, wow, man, that thing is wide. That thing is like, shooting in 1x red dot. It's probably the closest thing outside of the Swarovski Z6. So outside of that sight picture, there still has the 3 reticles to choose from. A JM1 BDC, my favorite, just because it's a simple BDC reticle, but some people don't like BDC, so you can still use VMR2 MIL or MOA, just like the PST Gen 2. Outside of the reticle choices, the brightness is controlled by this illumination knob on the left hand side. It has off switches in between, and it has a lock, so you push it down so it won't turn when it's in a bag, etc. It's got the same high quality, low profile capped turrets, although these are a little bit nicer than the PST Gen 2. Is the Razor worth 2 times the price? Almost. It's at $1,400 or so. Well, only you can decide that. Like, really, this thing is unrivaled. on 1X outside of the Swarovski, if that's not important to you. And it weighs less than the Vortex PSC, maybe about an ounce or so. You can see the specs here. Although I would actually add one other kind of a critical feature, in my opinion, that makes it worth it, is the zoom lever speed. Zoom lever speed is kind of underrated for a lot of people. Man, I really like to go when I need to spin something up, then it's like there. Who's this optic for? I want the widest field of view. I want the closest thing to a 1X, and I want a military grade optic. Well, I'd say the Razor's for you.
Nightforce NX8 F1.
Yards. Hit. 300 yards. Hit. 400. Hit.
Last but not least, the Nightforce NX8 F1. What really, impressed me the most when I was reading through this the first time was I was like, whoa, that can't be right. The weight's like 17 ounces. That's what the Steiner weighs. It's only a 1:4. Just like the Steiner, once you actually put this thing in your scope, you can hardly feel it. It's actually a lot shorter too. It's 8 inches. And once you mount it and look down the scope, the reticle is super bright. I did not even have to turn all the way up on a bright day. It is really bright. So the brightness is controlled by this knob. The illumination knob on the left hand side, it's got numbers with the off switch in between. It does not have a lock like the Vortex Razor. Although, while we're talking about reticle size, you spin this thing to 8 and you take a look through it. That center reticle, the measurements are online here, but it's huge, obviously, because it's first focal plane reticle. It's kind of not that good for shooting groups. Sometimes you have a small target and you put that center reticle on there, it's gonna hide it a little bit. The reticle choice, so they've got a mil and MOA on the F1 version. Personally, I prefer the mil reticle. The MOA reticle has like a ton of hash marks. I don't know why it has so many. You need, hash marks every 12 yards, Rain Man. I don't know. But if that's your deal, then, do it. Along the top of the scope, it has an exposed turret, as the other ones had a cap turret, because it actually has a zero stop. So you shoot, spin up your elevation that you need, shoot again, and you spin it all the way down and back down to your regional zero, which is, great. On the back, so this is an integrated zoom lever. It comes with it. You just screw it in, which is awesome. This thing is the fastest zoom lever of all the optics that I mentioned here. It's like choo, choo, choo. We talked about like all the things that I like, all the highlights of the scope. If we were to talk about limitations, the field of view is not as wide as the PST or the Razor. So, it doesn't totally bother you. It's not, you can definitely still shoot it fast, but it's not going to be like as fast as 1X speed as the Vortex Razor. You got this thing at 8X, like you put your eye behind the optic, like don't move too far off center or otherwise you're gonna get, Shadow City. So who's this scope for? Well, I'd say if you're looking for an 8X scope, first focal plane with a daylight bright dot, and you want to be lightweight as possible and don't mind paying $1,700, considering the glass quality and the feature set you're getting here, the NX8 is an amazing all-rounder, and it definitely makes the best variable scope list for 2019.
Best Variable Scopes 2019 edition.
Well, that is it, fellas. We are all caught up for 2019 as far as variable optics. First, I want to say thank you to all my long-term subscribers who sent me notes and messages while we had a little of a pause before this video. Sorry, I was gone for a while. I had some health issues, but I'm feeling much better now. So if you guys found this video helpful, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. As always, if you're interested in any of these scopes, please see the links below in the description area. If you do choose to use one of those links, thank you very much for supporting our channel. We're a small channel still, but we're looking to grow. We've got more fun and exciting things to come, and we'll see you on the range.